Welcome. We're very glad you're here and decided to take an hour out of your evening to spend with us. I'm Alyssa DiFilippo from Parents Helping Parents. I manage Connections California, and I'm just going to go into some Zoom instructions and then introduce my co-presenter of the evening. Right on. Luisa.
No worries, no worries. So I'm Luisamaria Castillo, and I'm currently the area manager for San Diego Imperial Valley for task in San Diego County. And I am happy to be here along with Alyssa.
Luisa actually helped create Connections California, so she knows this information inside and out. Okay. Takeaways for today. I'm sorry about that stumbling block. Transition to adulthood encompasses so much. And as I was saying, if you're here, you know that. Depending on an individual's circumstance, it could involve investigating public benefits or maybe alternatives to conservatorship, like supported decision-making, or maybe conservatorship, if that's the choice for your family. It could be about making connections with Department of Rehabilitation for work preparation. It could involve regional center services, whether your young adult was a regional center client since birth or whether they become one at the age of 17. It could include housing or other program options. It could include education or any kind of post-secondary training or schooling that your youth has interest in. So we want to plan for secondary education. Planning for secondary activities after high school. It often involves several other agencies, players, and decisions. And all these things that we as parents have to think about, it could just make us pull our hair out. So we want to talk about what every parent should know about transition to adulthood as a foundation for discussing how we can bring value to the transition process and engage in planning for secondary transition. We also want to talk about how to build positive relationships and opportunities through empathy, education, and patience, and be valued by the rest of the IEP team, or for that matter, any team your youth will be involved with, because, when they graduate high school, when they leave even a transition program, there's no more IEP team. It's the IPP team. It's the IPE team. It could be the program that they're in, or they could be in the self-determination program through the regional center. You'll have different teams throughout your youth's and then young adult and adult's life. So we want to talk about the importance of developing that mutual respect and trust between and among team members. So transition to adulthood is a big job for both you and your young adult. It's centered around your learner's development and learning, and you may have heard the term family engagement in education settings. That's a practice in which families and school personnel collaborate to support and improve learning and development of our students. It requires thoughtful planning and effort to develop and maintain, and it's unique for different families, and it needs to be culturally aware. Well, as parents, we can flip that around and we can talk about teacher or IEP team engagement and look at it from a parent's point of view. So what are the components of this teacher or IEP engagement? Well, we call them the 4 C's. There's collaboration. That involves parents and students and educators actively participating in meaningful ways. And everyone is consulted about decisions. Everyone brainstorms together. And you're respected when providing info, especially students' circle of support and those activities and community experiences outside of school, because that's something that the teachers and the IEP team in general, they may not know about. So you may want to have your student invite others who impact their lives outside of school to IEP meetings to share their knowledge, if that's appropriate, of course. Then we talk about communication as being more than one-way communication, parents to teachers or teachers to parents. We want to create a strong relationship, and we do that maybe by having check-ins before and after the IEP meetings, by sharing your youth's strengths and post-secondary interests, hopes, and dreams for training or education, employment, and independent living, by discussing your family's expectations and desires, what's worked and what hasn't worked in the past, and why. And ask when you don't understand the jargon. We'll talk about that in a little bit, or an acronym. and try and educate yourself as much as possible. And that's why the local PTIs, Parent Training Information Centers, or Family Empowerment Centers, FECs, and these Connections California events are so important. You've seen the calendar for the CCA events. And at the end of this presentation, there are a bunch of resources, and one of them is finding your Parent Resource Center in the state of California, and also your Family Empowerment Center. So we also want to have cooperation. We love that educators are committed to families, but families also need to be committed to prioritizing their child's education. That's reciprocal. So both schools and families benefit from it. Everyone on the team should respect and listen to each other, even if you don't agree. And that's key. You want to be available for meetings at mutually agreeable times, and you want to follow up with thank you notes. And you know, it's never a bad idea to write an email about something good, not just when there's a problem, just when a good thing happened at school or when you're just really feeling grateful about something. Put out there that positive energy, because that comes back to you in spades. And of course, the fourth C is cultural awareness, having a basic understanding of cultural norms and values. And that's a reciprocal thing as well. You want to share and educate the IEP team as to your family's culture, what it's like for your learner outside of school, what are the morals and values that are important to your family, and what might affect your learner's future. So how do we as parents get to a point where these 4 C's are the foundation of how we will participate in our youth's transition to adulthood? Well, that's where we go into our top 10 list of what every parent should know about transition to adulthood. Luisa, what should every parent know about transition to adulthood?
That's right. Thank you so much, Alyssa. So as our kids grow into adults, let's talk about what parents should know about this transition and how we can make it smoother, and more meaningful for them, how we can add value to this process. So we're going to be going over these 10 points, the top 10 list, and we want you to make note of that. As parents, sometimes we get really scared about everything related to our child's disability, especially when we think about life after high school. A lot of it comes from not knowing what options there are after high school. It feels like the future is right around the corner and neither we nor our kids are ready for it. So we worry about whether behavior issues might get in the way of their learning or finding a job. We're afraid that they might end up feeling lonely and disconnected from others. We ask ourselves questions like, what will my child do? And will they be happy and successful? We wonder how we can support them to have a good life. And then there's, the big worry, which is what happens when we're not around anymore. So these are all valid and normal questions to ask ourselves. We might feel cautious also or guarded about secondary transition because we're scared. And there's a lot to figure out, like finding out new support groups, people who can help us through this process, and planning for the future. Families deal with so many challenges as their kids become adults. And there's so much paperwork, so much planning to do. But alongside all of that, there's also so many emotions and feelings that we have to deal with. And that's what we go on. That's why we go on to this chart that lists various emotions and examples of how parents might show those emotions. For instance, if you feel anxious, you might go through big changes that can impact your attitudes, your values, your beliefs, your daily routines. And feelings can go up and down as time goes on. These feelings aren't set in stone, and they might come up again as your kid gets closer to, or should be getting closer to, any big life milestones like dating, driving, applying to college, even moving out. So being a parent of a child, a teenager, a young adult, even when they're all grown up with a disability, can feel like riding a roller coaster of emotions. It can be scary, it can be exciting, it can be surprising, and sometimes it can be rough. But the truth is that it's never going to be dull, right? Now, how can we help educators or teachers, with this part of our emotions? Emotions, like I mentioned, are a natural part of a family's journey. So it's okay to talk about all of our feelings with honesty. If you're feeling emotional, let them know that it's not about them. It's just part of, the ups and the downs of dealing with the situation. However, it's also important to not let our emotions take over, especially when there's conflicts. And I know that it's not always easy. You can say it and it sounds so much easy said than when you're there. But we want to try to control those comments or control anger or frustration. Sometimes it's just how we as parents process things, but learning how to control this can be helpful. Also, showing empathy towards teachers and asking them questions about what they know about the transition planning process can be very helpful. And not forget, that there's resources available to help with emotional support, education about transition planning. You can reach out to your local PTI, FEC for assistance, and you're going to be finding the contact information for these at the end of the presentation, like Alyssa mentioned. Depending on your area, you can find your local PTI and FEC. So what's point number 9? Start learning about adult services when your child enters high school, or even earlier if possible. And we say the alphabet soup, because we're talking about learning those transition terms, the agencies, the services available for adults. And to help us this, Connections California has created this amazing digital timeline for transition to adulthood that's available in our website. I think we shared it already, but Alyssa can go ahead and share it again. So we invite you, to look through it, and there you're going to find a detailed list of transition terms and agencies. You can check it out in your own time. And although it's going to seem overwhelming the first time you see it, take your time to digest the information. Resources are also going to be available for you at any time. They're always going to be there. So take your time, take it slow, organize yourself, and, refer to them whenever you need to. Also, attending transition resource fairs organized by the school district or regional centers can also be a great way for you to familiarize yourself with these types of agencies and resources available in your area. Now, there's so many terms and acronyms that we need to know. We see with this slide, IPP, ITP, DOR, SSI. What is this? If you're new to this, this is what we mean by the alphabet soup. You want to get familiar with these terms. And I'm just going to mention a few so that you can kind of, in case you know them. What is an IPE? Individualized Plan for Employment. Or what is DOR, Department of Rehabilitation? When we're talking about regional center clients, what is SLS, Supported Living Services, or an IPP, an individual program plan? So there are so many terms out there depending on the area, that you're focusing on. If we're talking about public benefits, you'll probably hear the term SSI, SSDI, DAC, DAC, Medicare, IHSS. So much to learn, but it's easier if we break it down into parts. So once again, our Connections California website is designed to help you do just that. So take your time, go on to it, and assign yourself tasks and steps, that you can start learning. If you want to focus just on employment, do that. If you want to focus on education or, adult life, whatever it is, start investing time in learning that alphabet soup. Now,
number 8 on the hit list of what every parent should know about transition to adulthood would be to start transition planning conversation early with your team. Start planning for that ITP, the individual transition plan, which is part of the IEP, based on our Individual Disabilities Education Act, IDEA Act, by the time the student turns 16. But that doesn't mean it can't be talked about sooner. And my most recent soapbox is that we could be talking about self-advocacy skills or even college and career readiness skills in elementary school, but especially those self-advocacy skills. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But if you're saying what's an ITP, right now, then these next few slides are definitely for you. And remember, if your child is still in school, it's not too late to begin building a robust ITP. And I'm even talking about transition programs too. So if a junior or senior or they're in a transition program, it's never too late. So the ITP is a short document, for those of you who don't know. It's about 2 or 3 pages long, depending on the IEP form. It's short, but it really packs a wallop. And as I said, the IDEA mandates that an ITP must be part of an IEP once the student turns 16, which means that transition planning and the written ITP should begin sometime during the student's 15th year. And as we said, best practice is to start earlier. And in fact, there is some new legislation, if it's passed, that will change the wording in California from the 17th birthday to the 9th grade in July of 2025. I've also seen it written as when an individual with needs is 14 years of age. And I believe it used to be that way in California, and then it went back to the federal, which is 16. So hopefully we'll return to that 14. And a well-crafted, detailed, individualized ITP can be the roadmap to a student's independence. And that's why we say a robust ITP could and should drive the IEP. So start that transition planning early, and that will typically result in better outcomes for youth. So what do parents need to know about ITPs? There are requirements for graduation. There's age of majority, which is this legal term. I mean, what even does that mean? There are transition assessments. People say assessments. I've heard speech assessments, psychoeducational assessments, academic assessments. What's a transition assessment? And then there are these overarching post-secondary goals. There is a link to the presentation on ITP resources in the end of the presentation. So, don't worry about the fact that you won't be getting this information. You will have it in writing and in links. So this age of majority and graduation. We're not going to go into this in a lot of detail, but just to know that there are graduation requirements in the IEP. If your student's getting a diploma, there'll be certain requirements. If they're maybe investigating the alternative pathway to diploma, and that's another whole issue, which we will hopefully be doing a presentation on in the fall. Or if they're getting a certificate of completion and they're not getting a diploma, whatever it is, it should be indicated on the ITP. Age of majority is simply the age of 18. That's what it means, why they have to say age of majority and not when your child turns 18, but they do. And let me read this to you because this takes a lot of primary caregivers by surprise. When you reach the age of 18, the age of majority, you have the right to receive all information about your educational program and make all decisions related to your education. This includes the right to represent yourself at an IEP meeting and sign the IEP in place of your parent or guardian. So youth are considered legal adults and legal rights transfer to them, not only educational rights, but also decisions related to medical and health concerns and financial arrangements. Where they want to live and how they want to live. So this is a big deal. And sometimes parents are like a deer in the headlights when they realize this is happening, but it's something to know about and just be aware of. So step one in the involvement, in involving yourself as a parent in the transition planning process is to involve your youth. So you may want to request a few of those transition assessments that I was talking about in middle school, even if it's just a simple interest inventory, to get your youth to start thinking about their wants, what their needs are, about their future. And talk to your team about appropriate assessment tools that provide for reflection, exploration, and preparation, and meet the student where they are. So these assessments will reveal needs, desires, wants, and I can do a whole hour on transition assessments, but suffice to say that the discussion and administration of transition assessments early and often accomplishes and allows you and your youth to start thinking about what's next for them. And it uncovers their strengths, their desires, but it also monitors their progress and changes as they go through those years. And their desires may change from year to year, and their overarching ITP goals may change from year to year. But that's why it's essential that the transition assessments happen early and often, so that the ITP is a meaningful document for your student, not just a boilerplate form. Again, we'll provide some resources at the end of the presentation in the packet for informal or formal transition assessments. And it's also good to check what your district already has, because several districts have several different kinds. So this is just a snapshot of one of the bigger parts of the main page of an ITP. And what's highlighted there are the three overarching goals: education or training. And there's just so much that teachers can do. So, parents and families need to fill in the gaps. So it's not a bad idea to identify and explore post-secondary education options if your young adult wishes to go to a 2-year or a 4-year or a trade program. And there are so many colleges and universities now that have what's called inclusive programs, where an individual with developmental disability can go away and have a college experience. You want to encourage your youth to research and investigate these post-secondary options. I mean, often if it says after school, I want to go to community college, well, one of those community activities or experiences should be going to that community college. So you may want to be able to tour those options, just like you would with a neurotypical child or young adult. I want to say young adult. And you can also investigate financial planning strategies and the potential for financial aid that's available to youth with special needs. We also have the second post-secondary goal is for employment. What are your youth's interests outside of school? What motivates them? It doesn't have to be a career. I mean, everybody has a first job. It could just be money is motivating them because they want to go shopping. Well, that's a good skill to learn, and it's good for you to allow your youth to maybe have a budget, maybe learn how to balance a budget. I mean, I'm not talking about balancing a checkbook or even using a checkbook, because God knows I'm now showing how antiquated a checkbook really is. But, they may have a Venmo card. They may be able to have something that you can somehow control the spending, but let them get used to how to purchase things, how to make a budget. If they have an animal, how to buy the animal's food and make sure that they don't run out of food at the end of the month. Things like this that will help them in their day-to-day living once they're flown the nest. So think about those community activities and experiences that you may be able to scaffold for your youth: a part-time job, an internship, volunteer work, shadowing someone at work, shadowing you at work, just anything that gets them out there and gets them to understand what the real world looks like. The third goal is independent living, and it says as appropriate. So community participation. It's essential to maintain a strong support network. It helps our youth to build a sense of confidence and inclusion, and it's a great way for them to make friends with and without disabilities. So we want to help our learners investigate the education, the community resources out there, whether it be theaters, museums, art galleries, places of worship, libraries, whatever interest they might take in things outside of school. And it's important to develop some of those interests while your student is still in school, because then they will transfer after they leave high school, and they'll have some consistency and with an interest. So that's an important thing for them. Where and how they're going to live. Are they going to live with parents? Are they going to live in their own apartment, with friends, in a group home? What kind of supports are needed? And what about transportation? How are they going to navigate transportation? I was at a meeting today where a woman from the University of San Diego was showing us a program that she has for individuals with autism that actually simulates driving. You put those goggles on, the virtual reality, and it simulates driving, so it gets them comfortable to so that when they might have no trouble passing the written permit test, but get them in a car and everything goes awry. So things like that they're out there for our are individuals if this is something that they want to do, but this is a program that gets them more comfortable with it. So navigating transportation is something that could be addressed as an ITP independent living goal. You know, and just managing those day-to-day details, cooking, cleaning, shopping, personal hygiene, this all comes under the independent living as applicable. So the value of the parent role really shines when it comes to scaffolding those activities and supports outside of the school environment. And we call it the triangle. You have that post-secondary goal of either employment, education or training, or independent living. And then you have the activities and community experiences and related services that support the goal. And then that ties back to the annual IEP goal. And we talked about collaborating with the IEP team earlier, and you want to give your input. You know your youth best. And if you can identify potential supports for your youth outside of school, family, friends, counselors, somebody in a church group, and you broaden their circle of support, that's an essential piece of adult living, by the way, is having that circle of support in place. And maybe inviting outside agencies or some of these people to the transition IEPs and think about how agencies can fill in the need your youth has. But having gone through this process myself, my daughter is going to be 26 soon, I can say that the parent's role is essential in scaffolding the activity and the community experience. We want to involve ourselves in the process of looking at secondary goals and looking for those opportunities for our learners in the communities, whether they're recreational, whether it's an internship, whether it's a first job, anything that can build student confidence outside of school, because again, we're providing our youth with opportunities to further their development, and we're adding value to the ITP in a substantial way. So this triangle that I'm talking about, it's important that it makes sense when the post-secondary goal, the activity and the experience, and the annual goal all work together to drive the IEP. That is what we mean when we say the ITP drives the IEP when a robust transition plan is in place. And that family engagement part of it, that comes in the creation of and planning for the supporting activity, the community experience that reflects the students' interests and is attainable for them. And that's how you as a parent can add value and be a big part of the ITP. Now let's look at an example, because I talked about that, but let's see what that really looks like. So this is actually from my daughter's ITP. She wanted to see, as you see, upon completion of school, she wanted to be either a dog walker or work at a doggy daycare, expand her knowledge of dog care, dog training techniques, customer service. So we had as her activity, her community activity, that she will interview and shadow a dog walker or people who work at a doggy daycare, and then she might secure a job or an internship as a dog walker. She had an internship in a doggy daycare, and then the teachers helped her make a list of 20 questions that she wanted to ask a dog walker. And then we, the family, I found the dog walker in the doggy daycare, and she took those 20 questions, and we took her and we scaffolded her to have an interview with these people and took notes. And then she took all that back to the classroom, and that's where the annual IEP goal comes in. That's on the left. Student will demonstrate understanding of skills and qualifications required to be a dog walker or a doggy daycare worker, identifying at least 5 skills as measured in 2 5-paragraph essays. So there's your writing expression goal. So what's important is that there was buy-in with that goal, and I had to scaffold it. I had to help to make that happen. But then once it did, it was published in the classroom newspaper and the school newspaper. So imagine the smile on her face, the self-esteem, the self-reliance, the self-confidence that came out of doing just that, just making sure that that triangle made sense. Number 7. Have I said it enough? Have I hit it over your head enough? Encourage transition activities outside of school because community experiences and activities matter just as much, if not more, than academics. In fact, there was a study done by, now this is a mouthful. It's the National Resource for Access, Independence, Self-Determination, and Employment. It's the acronym of RAISE. You see it there on the top left of the screen. It's the Technical Assistance Center back in New Jersey, and a Parent Training Information Center in Missouri. And they partnered and asked youth and young adults with disabilities about the preparation they received and its impact on post-secondary outcomes. And data from over 600 self-identified young adults with disabilities and 150 parents took part in this survey. And as you can see, the green, the experiences were the thing that helped. So you want to cultivate those interests and those experiences because that was the biggest indicator of success for them when they left school. So much energy and effort we as parents spend in getting them through school, right? In getting all those psychoeducational evaluations, the speech therapy evaluations, the OT evaluations, the adaptive PE, everything and anything that they do. So much energy goes into that, but that's such a small percentage of what it is for their total lives. And this study is showing us that they themselves say transition experiences are essential to successful outcomes. So I'm not going to read all these strategies that are on this slide, and again you'll get this in email to you tomorrow. But this is from thinkcollege.net, which is a wonderful resource. If you haven't visited yet, I highly encourage it. And this is from, actually, they didn't create it. They took it from someone else, but still, this sums up what we've been talking about in the areas of independent living, education and training, and employment. The idea to expose your student to as much as you can, as much as that seems that they're capable of being exposed to help them to prepare for life after school. There, you might have seen in the ITP that there were community experiences, activities, and related services. So number 6 on our list is just learning how related services should be addressed pre-ITP, during the ITP, and post-ITP. We're not, again, going to delve into this too much because related services is its whole own presentation, but helping your youth name what they need as an accommodation or modification, and then helping them know when to ask for it is pretty essential. So in the purposes section of IDEA, the Individual Disabilities Education Act, it does talk about the purpose of this title is to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So you may know as related services as, the speech therapy and the OT and the PT that they might get through school, maybe counseling. But it also could be recreational services. It also could be counseling with Department of Rehabilitation. It could also be motility services. It could also be social work services. So these are just things to keep in mind when you're at an IEP transition planning IEP meeting, just to make sure that if there are any assessments that need to be done, you get them done before you leave the high school setting. Assistive technology just kind of deserves its own little slide. It's not bad to have an assistive technology assessment before they leave high school, if it's appropriate. And, assistive technology doesn't have to involve a piece of tech, although these days, an iPad, a phone, anything that has any kind of an electronic calendar, I mean, that's all considered assistive technology. So is a pencil grip that's put on a pencil so that they're able to feel more of the sensory input and are able to write, although I'm not sure how many kids write. They're doing all the thumb things, right? But assistive technology is just to think about doing something with that before they exit school. Um, let's see. I
And
think I'm back over to Luisa to talk
yes,
about self-advocacy.
yes. So let's go on to number 5. So teaching self-advocacy and self-determination skills at home and encouraging self-advocacy goals in your youth's IEP early and often. And self-advocacy can mean so many different things to different people. A self-advocate can speak up for themselves, ask for what they need, share their thoughts and feelings with others. They know their rights and responsibilities, make choices and decisions, that affect their life. Now, self-determination can be about choosing and setting your own goals, being involved in making your own life decisions, advocating for those choices, working to achieve your goals, learning to solve problems effectively, and taking control and responsibility for your life and the outcomes of your actions. So it's about taking action to get what you want and need. And self-determination often leads to positive outcomes in education, employment, living independently, relationships, and overall quality of life. It includes qualities like self-reliance, self-confidence, self-respect, self-motivation, and self-awareness. And also, self-advocacy means asking for what you need in a polite and confident way. It could be, for example, asking a teacher for extra help or explaining to your boss that you need to do what you need to do in order to do your job well. Or even expressing or telling your doctor what your symptoms are, how you're feeling, finding something in a store, asking for directions. And it's important for people with disabilities, no matter how old they are, to know what they need in order to succeed and be able to ask for it. And there's some tips, like you see on the screen that can help you help your child speak up for themselves. For example, teaching them early, letting them make choices like deciding what they're going to be eating, what color they're going to be choosing that day for their shirt, for their clothing, talking to them about what they're good at and what they might need help with. Also, giving them opportunities to make decisions like planning their own school meetings, teaching them about their rights and responsibilities, or encouraging them to ask for help when they need it. So it's okay to ask questions and get support. Now, where's a better place to practice about speaking up for yourself and in a safer place like an IEP meeting? So we want to encourage students to lead their own IEP meetings. Research shows that when students are involved in planning their IEPs, they do better in school and achieve their goals more successfully. Don't we want our kids to do that? To be able to learn, think, and speak up for themselves? We all do. And there's a story that I know Alyssa wants to share about Grace, so let's give her the mic so she can tell us a little bit more about this story.
Okay, I will do. Yes, I'm not muted. Okay. So I was one of those parents who didn't want my daughter to hear what we were saying about her. So I didn't want her to come to her IEP. Now I wish I had had her come to IEP from the very beginning, even in kindergarten, just to say my favorite color is pink or I like math. Um, and even if you're resistant to naming the disability or having your youth know any details about their disability, they can still be taught what it is they need and how to ask for help when they need it. So my daughter did start going to her IEP, about half of the IEP when she was 16, and she'd write out her own version of her transition goals and really be involved in the planning. And I had been asking for counseling for her because she had some interpersonal relationship issues going on, some difficulties. And I'd been asking for counseling for about 6 months. So she came, requested the counseling, said why she wanted the counseling, and within 2 weeks, she was set up with weekly counseling appointments. So never, ever really underestimate the power of your youth's voice. It's huge. And they enjoy being included in the IEP. So 3 years later, when Grace was 19, after she had been coming to her IEP for about 3 years, um, I had gotten the email from the IEP team about when to schedule her meeting. It was going to be in 2 or 3 weeks on a Thursday afternoon. So I said to her, oh, your IEP's been scheduled for this Thursday, at 1 o'clock. And I'll never forget this. And I wrote this down because I thought it was so powerful. She put her pen down and she said to me, and I'll read this to you, "It's my IEP. Didn't anybody think to consult me about my schedule? It's not right. It's disrespectful. Why do they tell me I'm a grown-up and that my opinion matters and I should be making my own decisions? And no one even thinks to consult me about scheduling my IEP. I feel betrayed. What were they thinking?" Needless to say, I didn't have a good response. And she went on to say she didn't want to miss her work program on that day. She didn't want to let her boss down. And, she actually graduated from her transition program in June of 2020. And then when things opened up again in the summer of 2021, she actually was employed by this place where she had her work program as a little internship for 2.5 years because she showed that manager her work ethic and he rewarded it. So I want you to understand, if you go away with nothing else from this, that as parents, we need to understand that our youth, somewhere in them, they believe that rallying cry of nothing about us without us, and that we're not always going to be around to talk for them. And we need to start transitioning from the manager to consultant and start educating our youth and ourselves to be ready for that time. More about that in a little bit, though. First, we're going to talk about a little bit about person-centered practices.
Yes, let's talk more about that. So, you might have come across terms like, person-centered planning, person-centered thinking practices, and the learning community for person-centered practices is like the main hub or the grandmother, of person-centered resources and training, and they really embrace these practices. But let's talk a little bit more about what this is. So person-centered thinking, planning practices, whatever we want to call it, it's all about our mindset, the way that we're thinking. And it's actually a set of ideas or skills that form the basis for person-centered planning. And this person-centered planning is a process where we learn how someone wants to live their life at home, at work, in the community, and then we make a plan to help make it happen. And I really resonated or connected with what Angela Amado said about the person-centered approach. Instead of focusing on what someone can't do, we should be focusing on what they can do. And Angela Amado has been working on this approach for people with developmental disabilities for over 20 years. On the screen, you can see what she said about that. But just, a summary of what she said. She mentioned that instead of seeing someone just as a client with problems, as, someone from the system, we see them as a whole person, not identified by their disability. And we appreciate their abilities and strengths. We focus on helping them live as a normal life as possible. And this doesn't mean that we're going to be ignoring their disability, but supporting them in a way that feels natural and normal. The main goal is to support their individuality as much as possible, as much as we can. And what you see here on the next slide, it's actually a type of tool that we're going to go into in a moment. But person-centered thinking tools, they give us practical ways to collect information, important information, and have helpful conversations about setting goals, about solving problems, and making plans. And one important skill and person-centered thinking is figuring out what's important to someone and what's important for them. They sound the same, but they're different, I promise. And this is what you're looking at. This is actually page 14 of our family care notebook that I'm going to be showing you more shortly. But what's important to a person includes what they're telling us with their words and actions. And this is crucial because many people have been in situations where they have felt pressure to say what others wanted to hear. So we have to really pay attention to their behavior too. What it is that that's important for them. On the other hand, what's important to them. What's important for them involves things that we need to consider for their health, for their safety, and what others believe is important for them to be valued members of their community. For instance, someone might say that eating sweets, eating that food is important to them. However, if they have a condition, let's say diabetes, cholesterol, they may realize that it's not good to eat so much of this, as it may affect their health. So this shows us how important it is to strike a balance between what they want and what's best for them, especially for their overall well-being. So none of us have everything that we want. And none of us pay perfect attention to everything that we need. And we all strive to find a balance between the two. But first, we need to understand what's important to them and what's important for them. And we know that there's always going to be conflicts between these two from time to time. But it's important to take the time to think about these answers and see if we're considering both of these, what's important to them and what's important for them. And people may think that they understand right away, but we found that they need practice and that they need feedback. So that's why it's helpful to spend time having these conversations. And that's why these tools are so important. And we're going to be looking at our notebook on PHP's website. There's 3 languages, Spanish, English, and Vietnamese. And there's even a video tutorial in our e-learning library, in PHP's e-learning library. I still say my e-learning library. But it's crucial, to embrace a mindset of person-centered thinking. As your child grows and transitions to adulthood, they're going to be doing it on their own terms, based on their own wishes, wants, and needs. And I'm just going to quickly click on one of these so that you can see what it looks like. So this is the family care notebook. You can print it out. You can, just save it in your computer. But it's all about, the person, getting to know the person in case of an emergency, other healthcare, records. And then we go into the person-centered thinking and planning, the sorting important too, communication chart, etc. So we encourage you to take a look through it, and really use it as a starting point if you don't have anything in place yet. Okay. Now let's go on to the next slide, which takes us to point number 3, which is paying attention to, what your child is good at and helping them see their abilities and letting them make mistakes. And that's something that if they were to ask me that I have my child, she's 5 years old, but I don't want to, I want to protect her, I don't want her to make mistakes because I don't want her to suffer. However, when we see the importance of them making mistakes, we're kind of, allowing them to learn why it's important to do something or follow something or take into consideration, why we're telling them how to do a certain thing. So this is something that can be tough for us as parents. When you guys are in IEP meetings, when you guys are in therapies, they often focus on what they can't do. But what about their strengths? So this is what takes us to the next slide, focusing on strengths, on their abilities. We want to aim and concentrate on that. It's natural for us as parents to always think about their needs. Like I mentioned, medical appointments, evaluations, tests, services, therapies, they're all about meeting those needs. So when we start thinking about the future, it's challenging to switch to a mindset of focusing on their abilities. But that's what we want to remind ourselves about the person-centered planning, which is what do they enjoy? How can we help them turn their interests into strengths that they can use in their life? And we're going to give them a chance to do things and try things on their own. Now, the key to learning from mistakes is reflection, right? Making sure that our child knows about the services and supports that are available, how to get them. Now, if they choose that they don't want to use them, we're going to have to allow them to face those consequences. Helping them think about what they want well and what they didn't, what went well and what didn't go well, so that they can learn from it. And remember, they need to start taking more responsibility, making more decisions for their own success in their future. So making and fixing mistakes really helps us understand what we did right and what we can do better next time. And this is a great phrase, that Alyssa here found from Richard Branson that said, "Do not be embarrassed by your failures, learn from them and start again." So that's a great lesson to pass on to our kiddos, to our children. Now we've come to number 2 on the list, which is preparing yourself to shift from manager to consultant and preparing yourself to let go. And it sounds a little scary. We even created a whole different webinar on this, driving, the transition from driver to passenger, because we know how hard it is for a parent to let go, but remembering that letting go doesn't mean that we're going to leave our child alone in the world and for them to expect to figure it all out. That's not what we mean by this. Instead, it means, that you're going to be helping your young adult become as independent as they can be. And to make this process easier for you, there are some tips that you can try. For example, staying connected with your family and friends, reaching out to other families that are going through the same thing, or connecting with your community's resources so that you can stay informed and better support your children. Also, participating in events hosted by PHP, by Connections California, or any other resources out there that can help you with this transition that will make it smoother. Also, learning to adapt to your new role will help you prepare for your child's independence. When our kids are young, what do we tend to do? We tend to make most of the decisions, and lead their lives. But even at a young age, we can start giving them more responsibilities. That way, as they become young adults, we need to shift our role from being the boss, to being more of a guide. And this is going to help them feel confident in making their own decisions while keeping us informed of what they're doing. We understand that it's not easy to change roles, and to let go, especially when your child has a more severe disability and will always need support. You'll decide how much independence they can handle based on their abilities, but it's crucial for them to succeed. Now, parents need to change their role during this transition planning. As mentioned before, from being the one who makes all the decisions to being more of a guide, and this change is really tough for many parents, especially if their child relies too much on them and lacks certain skills needed to live independently or to get a job. It's hard if there hasn't been enough planning of transition. It's always easier to make this shift if your child has been taught, how to speak up for themselves, to know what they're good at and what they need, and to ask for what help they need, and when they need it. We need to teach those self-advocacy skills early and keep teaching them often. And it's important, to have goal for self-advocacy in the child's plan for school. Very important. And it's much harder, like we said, for parents who haven't taught their children about their disability to make this change, from being a boss to a guide. But as parents, as we said, we need to understand that people with disabilities, they want to be included in decisions that affect them. We won't always be there to speak for them. So that's why we need to start moving from being from the one that's in charge to being someone who's going to be guiding them and giving them advice. And we need to start teaching our children, to be ready for that. That's what we want to do. Now let's go on to one of the most important tips. So let's go with Alyssa.
Yeah, we made self-care the #1 tip. And, you'll probably know everything that I'm about to say in these next couple of slides. But if I'm honest with myself, I know that I don't practice self-care every day. And if I'm honest with myself, I know that the days when I do practice self-care, those days are better. They're better for everybody, right? Because when mom is happy, everybody's happy. So even if you don't do it every day, let's review some self-care principles, because remember, self-care is not selfish. So what can we do? We can get rest. We can exercise. We can eat healthy food. Or maybe we might want to eat chocolate because you don't want to make too much of a habit of it, but it helps, right? You want to consider family harmony and well-being, and not always have the youth or youths sometimes in families who have disabilities at the center of everything. Make time for those siblings. You want to add enjoyable activities to your and your youth schedules whenever possible, and connect with people who give you encouragement and hope, and do away with those who are too judgmental or think you're not parenting in the correct way, how they would parent your child. Consider a class in mindfulness-based stress reduction. and other helpful stress relief approaches to put in your stress relief toolkit. And try not to feel guilty while you're doing these things. Make care a self-habit, and try not to give in to resentment or frustration, but everybody does sometimes, obviously. But be gentle with yourself. Support groups are great for that. Parents Helping Parents has a whole slew of online now support groups. Used to be in person, now they're online. Your local parent training information center and your family empowerment center may have some support groups, or other agencies have support groups. It's just really good to be able to sit with a bunch of like-minded people and tell your story and hear their stories. And remember that we're role models for our children. So how we manage our how we manage our stress and our strength and our growth and our change, they're watching. So practice asking for help when you need it as well. So we want to think big at all times, right? That's what was behind creating the Connections California in the first place. We want to have high expectations for our youth. It's essential. We want to promote those person-centered practices. And remember that rallying cry of nothing about us without us. We want to encourage those learning opportunities outside of school as part of the ITP's community experiences and activities. And you will be adding such value to the planning process. I can't even say it enough. And educate yourself. And you want to start early so that you'll be able to not be so overwhelmed when your young adult turns 16 or 14 or in 9th grade if the new legislation is passed. So we can definitely help you prepare. That's what I said Connections California was all about. And Luisa is now going to, maybe, since it's already 7:29, Luisa, I think they have a pretty good idea that Connections California is a statewide online resource and information hub. Why don't we just take them there and give them a little visual?
Yes, definitely. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go straight to our website. So do you guys see it in Spanish?
Yes, it is in Spanish.
Okay.
Everybody speaks Spanish, right?
Let's change it to English so that you guys can see it.
It's a little bit easier for us out
There
there,
we
us
go.
monolingual English people.
So this is the hub. As you can see, it's divided into categories, 5 categories: transition planning for tweens and teens, self-advocacy, education and training, work preparation, and adult life. Each one of these categories contains its own content resources. So I'm just going to click, through transition planning for tweens and teens. And this is, for those parents that, if you have a young one, 12 years old, 13 years old, and you're barely, planning for transition, then this is where you want to start. And it's divided into, there's anchor links here if you want to go more into like high school diploma, what are my child's alternatives, a certificate of completion, the ITP. So if I go here, it'll take me straight to, the ITP, regional center. So you can just browse through this content. And if you see, there's links in the content. So for example, if you want to know more about the certificate of completion and you click on certificate of completion here, it'll take you to a whole different resource that talks more about it, which here it takes you to Disability Rights California, and it gives you more information if you want to, go in deeper about that topic. So let's close here. Then you're also going to be finding more resources on the side. So other resources, we have gathered a transition guide from the U.S. Department of Education, secondary transition planning. This is actually a link. So some of them are documents that you can download and some of them are links. You'll find e-learning videos on all of our categories, which are specific to what you're looking at. So if you click on e-learning videos for transition planning, you're going to find curated videos and others that are recordings from our own presentations, like the one that I mentioned, driver to passenger, what's the parent's role in transition to adulthood, or mapping dreams. There's a series that was created here about mapping dreams, the transition to employment, independent living, education. there's cradle to career, and so on. So you can, according to what you're looking for, you can find that. There's also, you know, a list of our upcoming Connections California events that you can browse through. Other related community resources just on transition. So this is one that you really want to take your time to look at. You'll be amazed at this resource, which is the community resource directory that is actually done by a volunteer at PHP. It's great. So take the time to look at it in your own time. And then we have our e-packet library, which is information by topic. If you prefer to read, you know, click on it and you'll find you can actually just select what you want. If you want to do transition to adulthood, select all the topics, put your email address, and you will receive it in seconds, you know, all those packets. And then you'll be able to explore, you know, the other topics. For example, let me just do adult life real quick. I know we're short. Are we good with time?
Yeah, let's give it a few more
so
minutes.
Okay, so let's go to adult life because this one actually has other pages to it. So all of the one that I showed you right now, that's how our four of our categories look like with just content on that topic. But this one, since we know adult life, you know, it's so broad and it's so many topics like financial planning, health and wellness, housing, living options, legal aspects. They all have, you know, so much more content. So we have created their own page. So if you go here, for example, to public benefits, you're going to get a whole different page, you know, that talks about Social Security, you know, Medi-Cal and Medicare, in-home support services, which also have their own links to these agencies. And they also have the sidebar with other resources that are important. For example, you know, California disability benefits, Social Security disability benefits, and so on. So you will find the same thing for these categories in adult life. Now I want to show you, if we go here to, okay, let's go back to this main page, the CCA page. So you're also going to be seeing that we have a link to our spring events. So what's going on right now, you know, if you want to register to any other events, pull this up and you're going to be able to just click on the topic that you're interested in. Right now we're in February, so we are in what, 21st?
Yeah.
Okay, the 26th is the next one, which is college success, technology tools and strategies for students. So if you click on it, it'll take you to a page so you can register. And then don't forget that we have added these highlighted boxes that actually have videos, recordings from our e-learning library that were probably from, you know, the past semester, you know, of topics that we have. So if there's one that interests you, you can actually go and watch the recording, you know, in each of these. Now I'm going to show you the timeline that we've been talking about. So explore the transition to adulthood timeline. And this is actually the digital version. So if you look at it, it's very, I just feel that it's done in a way that they really want you to take your time, you know, because we don't want to overwhelm anybody. If you look at the timeline, it's beautiful colored segments, you know, how it's done by age and by the categories of CCA. But obviously, you know, if you look at it, you're like, wow, this is so much. We want you to take your time, you know, in it and carefully, you know, look through it. So for example, if you are focusing on transition planning, you would look at the yellow area. And depending on your child's age, you know, if they're under 12, you know, if they're all the way to 22, you want to make sure, you know, that you look at that. For example, have your child participate in their IEP meetings, learn about student-led IEPs, and you can actually click on the bold words to learn more about it. So if you click here on participate, it'll open a page, which is 4 ways students can take an active role in their IEP meetings, right? So it's another great tool. So you'll also find, oh, what did I do? Okay, here we go. So, and then besides the timeline, we have here, you know, the adulting soup, for example, the glossary of transition terms. So if you click on it, it'll give you a list of those terms that you should be learning, you know, that you want to kind of get yourself familiarized with. So there's actually 4 pages of glossary terms, you know, that you can look at. Now, if you want to know what are the agencies available, what are the financial assistance and public benefit agencies that can help me, click on this one here, and it'll give you a list, you know, different agencies for adult life. So you can see this, and you can actually click on it, and it'll take you to their website. So it's really nice. Okay, and then, well, obviously this one, create your own adventure, how to use this timeline. It'll give you a few pointers, you know, as to how to use it, how to look at it, how to better understand it according to, you know, age, diagnosis, strengths, all of that. And here's a few timeline tips, you know, like look at one category at a time, go slowly, don't feel overwhelmed, you know, and how it's presented by age and by category according to our CCA website. So, now I think we can go back. Let's see. Is there anything that I missed that you want
I
to add
don't
on to,
think so.
Alyssa?
Nope, that was pretty comprehensive.
Okay. All right, so let's go on. We already showed that, the timeline. So let's go back to you, Alyssa.
Yes, so just the resource section is at the end. We have pretty much finished our presentation. Do you just want to scroll through the resources so they can see? Some people were asking, I've been trying to look at the chat and the Q&A. People were asking about transition assessment resources. You know, there are some here. These are work preparation resources. I am going to put now in the chat that the promised evaluation. It has 4 quick questions. If you could just click on it and answer them for us, we'd really appreciate it. As I said, that's what helps us to keep bringing quality programming to viewers like you. Here is that this is Find Your Family Empowerment Center, but this one is Find Your Parent Center. The Parent Training Information Center is federally funded. The FEC, the Family Empowerment Center, is funded by the California Department of Education. So it's just different funding sources, same kind of service. So there you can see where FECs are in the region and where your PTIs are. And those are the people you might want to call. Some people were asking me about local resources and you know, what are things for my 21-year-old child in Sacramento? You know, so Warm Line, I believe, is the PTI in Sacramento. So you would want to reach out to your local parent training information centers. And I think we don't want to keep you anymore. And we appreciate you. And please do visit the site and tell your friends.